Would you inform me of the amount of time that I have to speak?
There's been no time agreement made.
Okay, thank you. Ago, Justice Kennedy announced his retirement from the Supreme Court. Shortly thereafter, on July 9, the President announced the nomination of Judge Brett Kavanaugh to serve as the newest justice. Judge Kavanaugh has spent 25 years of his career in public service. He spent the last 12 years on the D.C. Circuit, considered the second most important federal court in the country. His record there has been extremely impressive because the Supreme Court, as an example, adopted a position advanced by Judge Kavanaugh's opinions no fewer than a dozen times. Judge Kavanaugh is also a pillar in his community and also in the legal profession. He serves underprivileged communities, coaches girls basketball, and is a lector at his church. He has shown a deep commitment to preparing young lawyers for their careers. He has been a law professor at 3 prestigious law schools and a mentor to dozens of judicial law clerks. This should have been a respectable and dignified confirmation process. In a previous era, this highly qualified nominee would have received unanimous support in the Senate. Before left-wing outside groups and Democratic leaders had him in their sights, Judge Kavanaugh possessed an impeccable reputation and was held in high esteem by the bench and the bar alike. Even the American Bar Association, which the Democrats say is their gold standard for judging judges, the ABA gave him their unanimous, well-qualified rating. What left-wing groups and their Democratic allies have done to Judge Kavanaugh isn't nothing short of monstrous. I saw what they did to Robert Bork. I saw what they did to Clarence Thomas. That was nothing compared to what we've witnessed here in the last 3 months. The conduct of left-wing dark money groups and their allies in this body have shamed us all. The fix was in from the very beginning. Before the ink was even dry on the nomination, the minority leader announced that he would oppose Judge Kavanaugh's nomination with everything he's got. Even before he knew the president's nominee, the minority leader said that he was opposed to all 25 well-qualified potential nominees listed by this president. Even one member of my committee said that those who vote to confirm Judge Kavanaugh would be, quote-unquote, complicit in evil. Another member of the committee revealed the end game when she suggested that Senate Democrats could hold the vacancy open for 2 years if they defeated Judge Kavanaugh and took control of the Senate in these midterm elections. I oversaw the most transparent confirmation process in Senate history, based on the fact that more than 500,000 pages of judicial writings, publications, documents from Judge Kavanaugh's executive branch service. This is on top of the 307 judicial opinions that he authored. Despite Democrats' efforts to bury the committee in even more paperwork, the Senate Judiciary Committee held a timely 4-day hearing on Judge Kavanaugh's nomination last month. Judge Kavanaugh testified for more than 32 hours over the course of 3 days. Judge Kavanaugh showed the nation exactly why he deserved to be on the Supreme Court, because of his qualifications. Judge Kavanaugh's antagonizers couldn't land a punch on him during his 3 days of testimony. Even when they made false or misleading arguments, they couldn't touch him. Some of my colleagues accused Judge Kavanaugh of committing perjury. For that false claim, the Washington Post fact checker awarded my colleague 3 Pinocchios. Another colleague claimed Judge Kavanaugh described contraceptives as abortion-inducing drugs. The video that my colleague shared on the internet was doctored to omit the fact that Judge Kavanaugh was describing the plaintiff's claims in a case that he decided, not his own views. My colleague was awarded 4 Pinocchios. And now, of course, that's the most Pinocchios you can get. But they still had one big card to play, which they had kept away up their sleeves for a month. Actually, for 45 days, I think. By July, the ranking member received a letter from Dr. Christine Blasey Ford alleging that Judge Kavanaugh sexually assaulted her in high school 36 years ago. Instead of referring Dr. Ford to the FBI or sharing these allegations with her colleagues, either of which would have respected and preserved Dr. Ford's confidentiality, and that's what Dr. Ford requested, the ranking member referred Dr. Ford to Democratic activist attorneys closely tied to the Clintons. The ranking member shamefully sat on these allegations for nearly 7 weeks, only to reveal them at the 11th hour when it appeared Judge Kavanaugh was headed towards confirmation because he was so qualified. The ranking member had numerous opportunities to raise these allegations with Judge Kavanaugh personally. I'll give you 6 examples. She could have discussed them with Judge Kavanaugh during their private meeting on August the 20th, a meeting which took place after her staff had sent Dr. Ford to Democratic lawyers, or another time shared them with 64 of her Senate colleagues who also met with him individually. The ranking member staff could have raised them with Judge Kavanaugh during a background investigation follow-up call in late August. Senators could have asked Judge Kavanaugh about the allegations during his 32 hours of testimony over the course of 3 days. Judiciary members could have asked Judge Kavanaugh about this in their closed session of the hearing, which the ranking member didn't attend. The closed session is the appropriate place to bring up issues where confidentiality is supposed to be respected. And there were no questions about these allegations among the 1,300 written questions sent to Judge Kavanaugh after the hearing. This amounts to more written questions submitted to this nominee after a hearing than to all Supreme Court nominees combined. Keeping the July 30th letter secret deprived senators of having all the facts that they needed to have about this nomination. So it wasn't then until September 13th, July 30th to September 13th, nearly 7 weeks after the ranking member received these allegations and on the eve of the confirmation vote, that the ranking member referred them to the FBI. And somehow they were leaked to the press. It wasn't until those news reports on September 16th that I learned even of Dr. Ford's identity. This is an outrage. The political motives behind the Democrats' actions should be obvious to everyone. Dr. Ford requested the opportunity to tell her story to the Senate Judiciary Committee. After a lot of foot-dragging by Dr. Ford's attorneys, they finally agreed to a public hearing. As promised, I provided a safe, comfortable, and dignified forum for Dr. Ford, as well as Judge Kavanaugh. Dr. Ford was sincere in her testimonies, as was Judge Kavanaugh, who emphatically denied the allegations. It's true that confirmation hearings aren't a trial, but trials have rules based on common sense notions of fairness and due process, not the other way around. It's a fundamental aspect of fairness a fundamental aspect of due process that the accuser have the burden of proving allegations. Judge Kavanaugh was publicly accused of a crime, and his reputation and livelihood were at stake, so it was only fair that his accuser have the burden of proof. The consensus is that the burden was not met. Ultimately, the existing evidence, including the statements of 3 alleged eyewitnesses named by Dr. Ford, refuted Dr. Ford's version of the facts. Our investigative nomination counsel, Rachel Mitchell, who has nearly 25 years of experience advocating for sexual assault victims and investigating sex crimes, concluded that there was lack of specificity and simply too many inconsistencies in Dr. Ford's allegations to establish that Judge Kavanaugh committed sexual assault. Even under the lowest standard of proof, she concluded, quote, "A he said, she said case is incredibly difficult to prove, but this case is even weaker than that. Dr. Ford identified other witnesses to the events, and those witnesses either refuted her allegations or failed to corroborate them. For the reasons discussed below, I do not think that a reasonable prosecutor could bring this case based upon the evidence before the committee, nor do I believe that this evidence is sufficient to satisfy the preponderance of evidence standard," end of quote. So, we have thoroughly investigated Judge Kavanaugh's background. In addition to the prior 6 FBI full field background investigations with the interviews of nearly 150 people who have known Judge Kavanaugh his entire life, the committee also separately and thoroughly investigated every credible allegation that we received. Our more than 20 committee staff members have worked night and day over the last many weeks, tracking down virtually all leads, and at the request of undecided members, the FBI reopened Judge Kavanaugh's background investigation for another week. The FBI interviewed 10 more people related to the latest credible sexual assault allegations, and the FBI confirmed what we Senate investigators already concluded. That is this: there's nothing in the supplemental FBI background investigation report that we didn't already know. These uncorroborated accusations have been unequivocally and repeatedly rejected by Judge Kavanaugh, and neither the Judiciary Committee nor the FBI could locate any third parties who can attest to any of the allegations. There also is no contemporaneous evidence. This investigation found no hint of misconduct, and the same is true of 6 prior FBI investigations conducted during Judge Kavanaugh's 25 years of public service. Nothing an investigator, including career FBI special agents, does ever be good enough to satisfy Democrat leaderships in Washington who staked out opposition to Judge Kavanaugh before he was even nominated. There is simply no reason then to deny Judge Kavanaugh a seat on the Supreme Court on the basis of the evidence presented to us. The Democratic strategy used against Judge Kavanaugh has made one thing clear: they will never be satisfied, no matter how fair and thorough the process is. 31 years ago, the Senate Democrats' treatment of Robert Bork, their playbook remains the same. For the left wing, advice and consent has become search and destroy, a demolition derby. I'm pleased to support Judge Kavanaugh's confirmation. I'm sorry for what the whole family went through the last several weeks. We should all admire Kavanaugh's willingness to serve his country despite the way he's been treated. It would be a travesty then if the Senate did not confirm the most qualified nomination in our nation's history. The multitude of allegations against him have proven to be false. They've also proven that no discussion of his qualifications came up with any discussion of his qualifications. Nothing showed he wasn't qualified. We had a campaign of distraction from his outstanding qualifications, a campaign of destruction of this fine individual. What we have learned is the resistance that has existed since the day after the November 16, 2016 election is centered right here on Capitol Hill. They have encouraged mob rule. When you hear things about get in their face, bother people at every restaurant where you can find a cabinet member, these are coming from public service that ought to set an example of civility in American society. And it's been made worse by what has happened to Judge Kavanaugh. I hope we can say no to mob rule by voting to confirm Judge Kavanaugh. I yield the floor.